Ladies and gentlemen, life can sometimes feel like a storm. It can feel like everything is coming at you at once, the pressure, the challenges, the obstacles, and in those moments, it's easy to start questioning whether you're going to make it through. You wonder if you're strong enough, if you're capable enough. But I want to remind you of something tonight, something that's been true in my life and in the lives of countless others. God never fails. Now, I'm not talking about some distant, abstract idea of God. I'm talking about the real, living power that's available to each and every one of us. The kind of power that gets you through when the world tells you that you won't make it. The kind of power that picks you up when you've fallen down, that lifts you up when your spirit is broken, and gives you hope when it feels like hope has run out. You see, life will try to knock you down. People will try to tell you what you can and can't do. They'll tell you it's too late, you're too old, you're too old, you're too this, you're too that. But you've got to remember, none of that matters when you're standing on the promises of God. Because when God is for you, who can be against you? I know what it feels like to be on the edge. I know what it feels like to look at your bank account, your relationships, your career, and wonder if it's all going to fall apart. But you have to understand something when God is in the midst of it. When God is with you, you are never alone. Even when it feels like everything is falling apart, God is still at work, weaving a story in your life that you can't see just yet. God's timing is not your timing. We want it now, we want it our way. But God sees the bigger picture. He sees the long game. And in the middle of the struggle, in the middle of the pain, when you feel like you can't go on, you have to trust that He is working it out for your good. Maybe not on your timetable, maybe not in the way you expect, but He is faithful. There will be times when you question everything. There will be times when you don't feel like you can take another step. But let me tell you something, the fact that you're still standing, the fact that you're still breathing, the fact that you've made it this far is evidence that God has never failed you. You are living proof of His grace, His mercy, and His never-ending faithfulness. And when you think about those moments where it looked impossible, when you thought there was no way out, think about how God came through. You didn't get through it by your own strength. It was Him. Every time. In ways you can't even see. He was right there in the fire with you, walking you through it. And because of Him, you made it. Now, that doesn't mean life's going to be easy. It doesn't mean there won't be more storms. But what it does mean is this: you have a power, a strength, a foundation that will never fail you. God is that foundation. When everything else shakes, He's the rock that remains unmovable. So whatever you're facing today, don't quit. Don't give up. God never fails. He won't fail you. He's never failed anybody, and He's not going to start with you. Stand firm, keep the faith, and know that He is working all things together for your good. No matter what, no matter when, God never fails. And when you look back at this moment, at this season in your life, you will see the hand of God in ways you never imagined. Because trust me, He is always there. He never fails. Keep walking, keep believing, keep fighting, and above all, keep trusting. God never fails. There's a unique power in having unwavering faith, a faith that stands firm in the face of trials and challenges, knowing deep down that no matter what, God will never fail. Life has a way of testing us, of throwing obstacles in our path that sometimes make us question everything we've believed. In those moments of uncertainty, it can be difficult to hold on, but this is where true faith begins to shine. Unwavering faith isn't just about believing when things are good, when everything is falling into place. It's about believing in God's goodness, His sovereignty, and His love, even when the storms of life are raging around us. We often hear the term faith thrown around in a way that suggests it's something you have when you're in church or when you're surrounded by people who believe the same thing. But real faith, the kind that doesn't fail, is the kind that stands strong in the toughest moments. It's the kind of faith that says, I don't understand why this is happening, but I know God is still with me. It's the kind of faith that knows God is in control, even when it feels like everything is spiraling out of control. It's not about having all the answers or knowing exactly how things will turn out. It's about knowing that even when the outcome is unclear, God is still working behind the scenes. Unwavering faith isn't passive, it's active. It means choosing to trust in God's promises every single day, even when our feelings don't align with our beliefs. It's easy to have faith when things are smooth, but when life gets tough, when we're faced with illness, financial struggle, heartbreak, or any of the countless trials that can come our way, that's when our faith is tested. In those moments, we have to choose to believe that God has not abandoned us, that His word is true, and that His plan for us is greater than what we can see. Having unwavering faith also means understanding that God's ways are higher than ours. We may not always get the answers we want, or we might find ourselves in seasons of waiting, but God's timing is perfect, and His wisdom is far beyond our own understanding. When things don't go as we expect, that's when we must lean in and trust that God sees the bigger picture. We may be walking through a storm, but God is with us every step of the way, and He will never leave us to face it alone. There's a strength that comes from knowing that God's faithfulness is not contingent on our circumstances. He is faithful because that is His nature. Even when we are unfaithful, He remains true to His word. This is a reminder that our faith isn't about us having all the answers or being perfect. It's about trusting in the one who is perfect. It's about surrendering control and recognizing that no matter how many times we fall or fail, God's love and grace are always there to pick us back up. In moments of doubt, it's easy to get lost in the noise of the world, to listen to the voices that say, you can't do this or this is too much, but that's when we need to remind ourselves that we don't have to rely on our own strength. Unwavering faith is the belief that God will carry us through even the most difficult of times. It's the conviction that no matter what, He will never leave us nor forsake us. That is the kind of faith that can withstand any storm, that can stand strong when everything else is crumbling, because we know that God never fails. God's timing is something that can challenge even the most faithful. We live in a world that is built on instant gratification, where everything is available to us in a matter of seconds. We can order a meal, get a ride, or buy something online, and it's delivered to our doorstep in no time. In this fast-paced environment, we begin to expect the same kind of immediacy in other areas of our lives, especially when it comes to our dreams, desires, and prayers. We pray, we ask, we believe, and we want to see results right away. But God's timing isn't like our timing. His timing is perfect, and it operates according to a much bigger plan that we can't always comprehend in the moment. God's timing is never late, but it is often not as quick as we would like. There are moments when we wonder why things aren't happening when we think they should. We may have been praying for years for a breakthrough, for healing, for restoration, or for a dream to be realized, but nothing seems to change. And in those moments, it's easy to feel frustrated or to question God's plan. But we must remember that God sees everything from an eternal perspective. He knows the end from the beginning. What may feel like a delay to us is often God preparing us for something greater, something we aren't yet ready to handle. He is at work behind the scenes, aligning circumstances, relationships, and opportunities in ways that will bring about the best outcome for us in His time. When we look back on our lives, we can often see the pieces of the puzzle come together in hindsight. There are times when we wanted something so badly, but we couldn't understand why it wasn't happening. But years later, we look back and realize that had it happened sooner, we wouldn't have been ready for it, or it wouldn't have worked out the way it was meant to. Sometimes God's no or His wait is just as important as His yes. In fact, the times when He tells us to wait often reveal the most about our character, our trust in Him, and our ability to surrender control. Waiting is one of the hardest things to do, especially when we don't understand the reasons behind the delay. But in the waiting, we are not alone. God is there with us, guiding us, teaching us, and preparing us for what is to come. Waiting on God does not mean inactivity. It means trusting in His plan, staying faithful, and continuing to move forward even when we don't see immediate results. It's a process of building resilience, patience, and deeper faith. God's timing is also a reminder that His ways are higher than ours. We may have our own plans, but God's plans are always better. His wisdom far exceeds our own understanding. There are times when we think we know what's best, but we can't see the whole picture. God, however, sees every detail and knows exactly what we need and when we need it. That's why we can trust Him even in the waiting, knowing that He is faithful to fulfill His promises, but on His perfect schedule, not ours. When we remember that God is always at work in our lives, even when we can't see it, it helps us to relax into His timing and trust that He will bring things to fruition when it is the right moment. Just because things aren't happening on our watch doesn't mean God isn't moving. He is, and His timing will always prove to be exactly what we need, even when we can't immediately see why. There are moments in life when it feels like we're walking through a wilderness, uncertain of the way forward, surrounded by obstacles and unsure of how we're going to make it through. In these times, when we're faced with difficulty, pain, or hardship, it's easy to wonder where God is in all of it. But it's important to remember that in the midst of adversity, God is at work, even when we can't see it. His unseen work is something we often overlook, but it is just as real and powerful as anything we can observe in the physical world. Often, when we're in the middle of a struggle, all we can focus on is the immediate challenge in front of us. It's hard to see beyond our circumstances, yet if we take a step back and reflect, we will realize that God's hand has always been at work in our lives, even when we didn't recognize it. Sometimes His work is happening in ways we cannot fully understand or appreciate until much later. For example, the challenges we face today might be building our character or preparing us for something greater. God is shaping us, refining us, and teaching us lessons that will serve us in the future. His ways are not always clear to us, but we can be confident that He is always at work on our behalf. The truth is, God is a master weaver, working behind the scenes to bring together every detail of our lives, even when it seems like nothing is happening. I think of all the times in the Bible when God was working quietly in the background, orchestrating events, setting things in motion, and laying the foundation for something significant. Whether it was in the life of Joseph, who went from being sold into slavery to eventually becoming second in command in Egypt, or in the life of David, who was anointed king while still a shepherd, God was working in ways that weren't immediately visible. These men could not see the full scope of God's plan in their moments of struggle, but later on they would understand that everything they went through was part of a much bigger story. We are no different. In our own lives, we often don't understand why things happen the way they do, but God's unseen work is still unfolding. Sometimes it's only in hindsight that we realize how He was positioning us, refining our character, or teaching us lessons that would be crucial in the seasons to come. The disappointments, the hard actions, and the struggles are not in vain. They are part of God's process of shaping us into the people He's called us to be. When things aren't going the way we hoped, or when we face setbacks, it's important to remember that God is not absent. Even in moments of confusion or pain, He is working on our behalf. He is positioning people, opening doors, and orchestrating circumstances that will ultimately lead us to where we need to be. Sometimes this means waiting, sometimes it means walking through difficult seasons, but always it means trusting that He is at work, even when we can't see it with our natural eyes. God's unseen work is also a reminder that His plan is bigger than anything we can imagine. His perspective is eternal, while ours is limited to what we can see in the moment. When we don't understand why things are happening, we must choose to trust that God knows exactly what He's doing. The times when we feel abandoned or confused are often the very times when God is doing His most significant work in our lives. He may be pruning, refining, and preparing us for something greater, and though we may not see it now, His plan will unfold in His perfect time. When you face adversity, one of the most important things you can do is to keep moving forward with persistence. It's easy to be discouraged when things don't seem to be going your way, or when you've been hit with setback after setback. You might feel like you're stuck in a never-ending struggle, and it can be tempting to throw in the towel, to give up, or to walk away from everything you've been working toward. But it is in those very moments when you feel like you've reached the end of your rope that the power of persistence becomes clear. It's not about avoiding the hard times or wishing away the difficulties. It's about pushing through, holding on, and continuing to trust that God is working in ways that you cannot see. Persistence is an act of faith. It's a decision to trust that, even though things may not be going according to your plan, God has a purpose and a timing that will unfold. You may not always understand why certain things are happening or why things are taking longer than you expected, but you can trust that God is always at work, even when you don't see immediate results. There are times when persistence feels like a struggle, when it seems like all your efforts are in vain, but the reality is that every step forward, no matter how small, is moving you closer to your destiny. The power of persistence lies in the fact that you're not doing it alone. It's easy to get overwhelmed when you feel like you're carrying the weight of everything on your shoulders. But in those moments, remember that God is right there beside you, strengthening you, guiding you, and providing for you. He's not only walking through the storm with you, but He's also using that storm to shape you, to build your endurance, and to prepare you for what lies ahead. The challenges you face are not random. They are part of the process that God is using to develop your character and to help you grow in ways that you couldn't if everything were easy. Persistence also teaches us resilience. It's about bouncing back after failure, after disappointment, and after setback. Life will knock you down, but the key is not staying down. The key is getting back up, dusting yourself off, and continuing to move forward. This is where faith intersects with persistence. It's in those moments when you feel like giving up that your faith is tested and refined. Will you choose to believe that God has a plan for you, even when it feels like nothing is working? Will you keep going, trusting that He will bring you through no matter how tough the road gets? But persistence means continuing the journey even when it doesn't make sense. It means taking one step at a time even when you don't know how far the road stretches ahead of you. It's holding on to the belief that in the end God will fulfill His promises and everything you've gone through will be worth it. The power of persistence is not just about sticking it out, it's about doing so with faith, with trusting God's plan, and with the conviction that He will never fail you. Every challenge you face, every moment you persist, brings you closer to the place where God's purpose for you will be fully revealed. When you reflect on your own journey, there are moments that stand out as undeniable proof of God's faithfulness. These are the moments when you thought there was no way out, when everything seemed impossible, and yet you made it through. These moments, though they might have seemed insignificant at the time, are evidence that God has never failed you. Looking back, you can see the hand of God moving, guiding, and sustaining you even when you didn't realize it. These are the moments that remind you of God's unshakable faithfulness, the moments where His presence was evident even when the path seemed unclear. It's easy to forget just how far you've come when you're in the middle of a difficult season. You can get so caught up in the challenges in front of you that you lose sight of the progress you've already made. You might look at your present circumstances and feel discouraged, wondering how you're going to make it through the next day, let alone the rest of your life. But if you take a step back and look at the bigger picture, you'll realize that every trial, every hardship, and every battle you faced has been part of the process that's brought you to this very moment. You've made it through before, and you will make it through again. God never fails. He didn't fail you when you were going through your hardest battles, and He won't fail you now. Every trial you faced has been an opportunity for God to demonstrate His power and faithfulness in your life. It may not have always felt like it in the moment, but every time you got back up after falling, every time you kept going when you felt like quitting, that was God strengthening you, preparing you, and showing you just how much you can endure with His help. You are stronger now than you were before, not because of your own strength, but because of the strength that God has given you. And yet we often find ourselves doubting. We question why things aren't working out the way we expected. We look at our circumstances and wonder where God is. But the truth is, God is right there in the midst of it all, even when we can't see it. He's working behind the scenes, setting things in motion, opening doors, and making a way where there seems to be no way. His faithfulness isn't dependent on our understanding or our timing. It's dependent on His character, which is constant and unchanging. Sometimes we expect immediate results, and when those results don't come as quickly as we want, we begin to lose heart. But God's ways are higher than ours, and His timeline is perfect. We may not see the immediate answer to our prayers, but we can be assured that God is always at work, even when things aren't happening on our timeline. The things we want may not be ready for us yet, or we may not be ready for them. But in the meantime, God is preparing us for what's to come, teaching us lessons that will help us grow stronger in our faith. Looking back on the times when it seemed like God wasn't answering your prayers or moving in your situation, you can now see that He was working all along. He never left you. He never abandoned you. Even when you couldn't feel His presence, He was there quietly at work, arranging everything for your good. You might not have had the vision at the time to see how He was moving, But now you can look back and understand that every step of the journey was part of his perfect plan. God never fails, and his faithfulness will continue to carry you through every season of life.